Hello and welcome everyone to a DuraSpace community webinar. My name is Christy Searle and I will be facilitating today's session. A few housekeeping items before we get started. For your convenience, there is a Q&A feature located in your menu. At the end of the presentation, we will be taking questions from our audience and we'll ask you to post your questions there at that time. Today's webinar is being recorded and both the recording and slides will be made available after the presentation at duraspace.org. We are pleased to have you with us today for our webinar, Supporting a VIVO Regional Community. Joining us is Christian Hauschke, the VIVO coordinator at the German National Library of Science and Technology. Christian studied librarianship in Hanover before working in libraries in Magdeburg, Dusseldorf, and Hanover again. He worked in different fields from information literacy to managing an open access repository. Since 2016, he's been working at the Open Science Lab of the TIB, where he coordinates the VIVO activities. This includes a VIVO for TIB and additional research institutions. Thank you for joining us today, Christian. I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you very much, Christy. I'd like to talk today about supporting a VIVO regional community. This includes several pieces of agenda. I'd like to talk at first about the goal, what we're working on, then some fields of action that we had to cover. Then we are going to the community that we had to build, the community tools and the communication, the means of communication. And then I would like to talk a bit about the need for investigations. At first, I'd like to tell what we were aiming for. In order to be applicable in width, some conditions must be fulfilled by VIVO to be adopted to the needs of German scholarly landscape. Of course, the VIVO has to be translated. That means we had to work on true multiple language support, and we had to do some modifications on the ontology to align it to the German academic culture. We had to work on the documentation and code to comply with German laws and regulations. And we had to work, and we still have to work, on some features. Let's start with the fields of action. The first part, the laws, regulations, and guidelines. The German Federal Office for Information Security provides definitions and concepts for IT security and a catalog of questions for different kinds of application, the so-called IT Baseline Protection Manual. This is like a catalog where you can find what you should look for at your application to see if it's secure and safe. We went through the catalog that's applicable to web application with VIVO, and we found some issues that we had to work on. One or two of these issues were more of an organizational nature, like having guidelines for passwords, but some of them had to do with the code itself. So we worked on a new mechanism for password hashing. I don't go into the depths of explaining how the Argon2i algorithm works. My colleague implemented, and I'm pretty confident that this is a good practice of how to implement password hashing. So let's not talk about technical details, but this is a good example where the German community needs something, so it's only natural that the solution came from the German community too. The baseline catalog requires us to have certain standards in hashing, and now we have them. It will be available with the new VIVO release 1.10. The next field of action is translating VIVO. We had the idea to just translate some files to make VIVO reusable in German-speaking countries. That was a bit naive, but we're pretty optimistic that we are getting closer to our goal. A VIVO with real multiple language support with some extra features that are essential to the people and institutions in Germany's scholarly landscape. That is, there are different expectations in German academic institutions regarding VIVO. It seems to me that VIVO is often seen solely as a research profile system in the international community. In German, Germany, a lot of institutions have already modular research information systems, and they would like VIVO to be a part of their modular information system, and not necessarily only or at all for showcasing research on the web. So let's start with what we achieved so far. We did a basic translation of most, if not all, language-related files for since VIVO 1.6, the ontology and the templates and visualizations and so on. It started a few years ago as we took the English language files and forked them on GitHub. We made a translation that was worked on by different people from different institutions. The current implementation is, for example, live at work at our TIPS VIVO. Now we worked on, during the last development sprint in April, on the missing translations for VIVO 1.10, and it works very good. And the whole translation is a collaborative effort of the German community. We will get back to this later on, but this is a very important aspect. You can find all the files we have at the VIVO-DE GitHub repository. I will go back to this later too. So we have the next field of action. This is the ontologies. It's not only one ontology, it's three ontology. It's VIVO-ISF, VIVO-DE. DE stands for Deutsch, Germany, and KDSF. So let's talk about ontologies, and here is where the fun begins. The idea was to translate the labels and descriptions of VIVO's ontology into German. That's not so trivial to make it short. We had some problems with the linguistic and cultural difficulties that can arise with such a translation. The problem is, for example, that common instruments that could be used for such a transfer are often relatively blurred, and this can be demonstrated with the so-called Chinese whispers problem. Maybe you know this. This is a game where kids are whispering something in each other's ear, and at the end of the game, there is something completely different that you had at first. So I looked up academic department at Wikipedia, at the English Wikipedia. You see this in the top left. And this is a key class in the VIVO-ISF ontology. And then I chose to go to the Lithuanian Wikipedia, and there you can already see that the meaning differs a bit from what we had before. Then I went to German, to French, and then to English again. And usually we should land at the academic department again, but we are not. We are now at a named professorship. So it's not easy to translate terms one-on-one. You always have to translate the context with it. So why an extension for German institutions at all? We know that localization requires local ontologies. We have some examples for this. For example, we have an ongoing discussion since years how to deal with the English term grant. We don't have such a thing here in Germany. We have grant, we have fundings, but we always talk about projects. And in VIVO, a grant is a very central, fundamental concept. So we have to find a way how we can translate the ontology semantically correct, but move the features that are applied to the term grant to another term. And we have classes for organizations that do not exist in the Anglo-American world. For example, Lehrstuhl and Fakultät. These are organizational classes that are just not there. So to achieve interoperability of German VIVOs, we took on a collaborative approach for an ontology extension. It started with the work of Elena Liventsova. She was an intern and student assistant at the time, and she investigated which types of organizations and staff exists in German academic institutions. So the goal of the extension is to add these and other properties and classes that we need to represent the specifics of the German scholarly landscape. And the initial release was made by Kilian Schmidtner of Viadrina University and Stefan Wulff of Technical University Dresden. And now we work on this with them and others collaboratively. The goal of the VIVO ontology means one of the ontologies that are used in VIVO. We added this and found some rules for the extension. We had to agree on some rules. For example, we take a German class name if there's no English equivalent. We have a translated class name if there is an equivalent in English, but not in the VIVO-ISF ontology. We have both English and German labels. We agreed that this is the minimum we should deliver. So institutions that have not a German VIVO can at least use the fallback solution, English. If the class seems to be very general but is meant for a very narrow case, it comes with an explaining abbreviation. I think a good example for this is Promotion. Can be pronounced promotion in English, but it means completely different thing. In German, a Promotion means the process of getting a PhD. So we have the label Promotion and then in brackets German. All classes are merged with one of the VIVO ontologies, and all classes come with annotation properties. So it can the complete VIVO-DE ontology extension can be imported and be used ready to go. In numbers, we have right now 18 classes, no object property and 1 data property. There will be more data properties soon, and we are working on other classes too. The process to get a new class into this ontology is pretty easy. We have 3 stages. We discuss if a certain new class, for example, is interesting to more than one institution, then we discuss to include it in the VIVO-DE extension. And if it's maybe interesting to the complete VIVO community, we suggest it to the VIVO-ISF ontology. A recent example for this is the spin-off company. One of our partners suggested this, and we suggested this then to the international community. Another ontology that's very important to the German scholarly landscape is the research core dataset called KDSF. It aims to deliver definitions for large part of the scholarly landscape, and it was developed for the German Council of Science and Humanities from 2013 to 2016, and it is recommended as a standard for implementation at research institutions in Germany. The goal is to, I quote, it will provide foundations for a quality assured data exchange between universities or research institutions and recipients of the information in the German research system. So it aims to be a standard for research reporting, and it delivers definitions for core indicators like publications, projects, human resources, and so on. And it's essential to most research institutions in Germany. When we are talking about VIVO in Germany, we usually talk about the KDSF tool. You cannot divide this. So we at TIB transformed the data model of the KDSF into an ontology via matching and merging. And the goal of this is to provide a VIVO that enables every institution to aggregate KDSF compliant data in VIVO, to enter the data and reuse existing data compliant to the KDSF data model, and to use data in VIVO to produce KDSF compliant reports. The reports are, for example, needed for ministries or funding organizations. Now we have to figure out how we can align these ontologies with each other to serve all scenarios. Some institutions will use the VIVO-DE ontology only, others only the KDSF extension, and others again will use both together with the VIVO-ISF ontology. So we would like to enable users to have ontologies a la carte where you can choose what you'd like to have. So let's go to the most important thing about VIVO. This is the community. I'd like to talk about some workflows, tools, and means of communication. At first, the community in Germany consists of a slowly but steadily growing number of institutions. These include several universities and non-university institutions, and the VIVO registry gives only an incomplete impression. Some institutions seem to be very shy with giving any information about their activities. So right now, I think we have 9 institutions in the registry, but I know at least about 15 or 20. To communicate in the German community, we provide a mailing list where you can register. We are doing some announcements there. We are communicating about calls when we are discussing which ontology classes should be added and so on. We do regular video calls or on translation and ontology issues. We use the Slack installation of the international VIVO community where we added a German channel. It's called VIVO-DE. You can register at the Slack community via the bit.ly link I provided here, and then you just go to how's it called, hashtag VIVO-DE. And then I think the most important thing is the German VIVO workshops we host. We did it, the TIB did it first 2015, then last year, and we will do it again this year. These are workshops where people were interested in VIVO, were working on VIVO, or working on research information at all, come together to see what happened in the international community, to exchange knowledge, and to decide on cooperations and so on. The next VIVO workshop will be on the 17th and 18th of September 2018 at the TIB in Hanover. The collaboration happens technically on GitHub. We have a GitHub-based workflow. We have a GitHub repository with the ontology files, for example, and with the language files too. There we have issues that we discuss in the aforementioned calls, and everything we discuss, we document in the wiki. So for example, if we decide to use a certain term as a translation, we try to add it to a glossary to enable other people or institutions to follow up on our discussion and document the reason for decisions. Everything we do is reusable. Everything is transparent and reusable. This is okay. GitHub is a nice tool for computer scientists, but it's not very user-friendly. So we had to think about solutions to make it more inviting to collaborate on the ontology and the translation. So in the search for a tool that could solve these issues, we found Vocal. It's a tool for collaborative ontology development. It's for heterogeneous and distributed environments, and it's developed at Fraunhofer Institute for Intelligent Analysis and Information Systems. And we are working pretty closely together with this institute, and that's why we had a direct contact to the developer. And he set up a testing environment for us to find out if this is a tool that we could use. And to make it short, I think it's a very promising tool. With Vocal, you have basic editing capabilities with auto-completion and included debugging in the editor. You can see that on the top left, in the top left image. You can enter, edit the ontology files, and you can directly submit to GitHub. And you see if there are syntax errors or typos or whatever. You have a human-friendly documentation based on the open source Vidoku tool. You can see interactive visualization of ontologies with a web vowel. It's integrated there, so you can see if there are some misconnected classes or properties. You have a Sparkle query tool. You can see error reports for all files in a repository, and you get a quick overview about syntax error. And even the commit history can be seen and overviewed very easily with VOCAL. There are some issues with this software, but I'm very optimistic that they can be solved. So let's come to the need for investigations. To support a community, it's essential to find out what this community needs. For this, it needs more than the view of one person or even one institution. The TIB's view of things may not be wrong, but we may miss others' views and perspectives when we do not try to communicate and investigate. For this reason, we set up at the German workshop last year an interactive session where around about 40 participants discussed a wish list for VIVO. We asked all the people, what would you like VIVO to be? What are you missing in VIVO? What would you like to work on, or what would you like others to work on? We tried to cluster the outcome and had some very straightforward results. The two main concerns of the German institutions or people who are investigating VIVO were the lack of a reporting tool in VIVO and the need for an advanced role management. On the latter, we are currently working on, so you can expect some results in the near future. But the TIP has used some other methods to investigate user needs in research information systems. At first, we had to decide who our core users are and stakeholders are. We have maybe 3 core target groups or stakeholder groups. There are, at first, institutions represented by people from the research administration, because the institutions cannot speak for themselves. Then we have scholars, various kinds of scholars. Some are more focused on research, on teaching, or whatever. And then we have the public. This can be the society as a whole, but the individual too, which are worth to have us a look on it on each differently. So we made a study with 30 semi-structured interviews with researchers and 20 semi-structured interviews with research administration, both from universities and non-university research institutions. We wanted to find out the use of research information systems in research institutions. So what are the needs? What are the use cases? And we did another study, a survey on information and publication behavior of researchers in science and technology. And there we included some questions about research informations too. It was a study with 1,460 participants. In this way, we gained some insights into what we should work on. We learned, for example, that including communication tools in VIVO would be interesting only to a small minority of researchers. Previously to this, we talked to some researchers who gave us the impression that this is maybe one of the primary use cases of such a tool. And so it was really worth investigating a larger group of researchers to find out that our impression is not doesn't align with a greater amount of researchers. We were living in a filter bubble, maybe. So what has to be done? We need more research on the needs of researchers and research administrations with regards to VIVO. That means we should not only talk to research administrations, not only to in our organization and with other institutions, we really have to investigate systematically. We should start in-depth research on the information needs and behavior of the public. So make surveys and qualitative studies to find out what does the society, what does the public want from research information systems. We have to communicate more. We have to exchange our knowledge about users on a national and international level. This discussion started at the VIVO conference last week, where I took part in a panel about user needs, and we agreed on having more communication. So if you're interested, please join Slack, please join the VIVO mailing lists. I hope there will be a lot of follow-up discussions and collaborations on exchange of knowledge about user needs. And we need more communication about and between VIVO projects and related projects. I said it before, I know about more VIVO installations in VIVO that are in the VIVO registry, and we should all talk more about what we are doing and that we are doing something. So if you are using VIVO, please register in the VIVO registry and please commit to the mailing lists. Maybe introduce yourself with 3 or 4 sentences. That would be very nice to learn about your work and to learn about what your users are needing. Maybe we have some similarities in our user groups and maybe we can work together. And this leads to the last point. We have to intensify the work with the international communities. For example, we are working on the multiple language support with some other institutions in Canada and United States and so on. And we would like to find out if your scenario, if your use case, if your regional community needs something that we didn't think of because we don't know the community. So to get to improve VIVO faster and make it better, we need to work more closely together. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm happy to answer some questions if you have some.